Greetings friends, welcome to another video. This is Rodil, this is Yakov, and today we'll continue our conversation about breath health, right? About the health of the breathing system. And in the most recent video, I shared with you this one tool from the yoga arsenal called Java Neti, right? So this is a kettle for washing your nose. And if you haven't seen this video, I strongly suggest that you watch that one first, because this video is a natural continuation of what we talked about in that video. So just to recap very quickly, we discussed why it is important to make washing your nose pretty much be on par with brushing your teeth. Right, so it should become just as regular and just as mandatory for you in your daily life, or at least you should aim to do that as much as possible, right? And in that video, I mentioned that by doing that, you will improve the quality of your breathing immensely, especially if you have problems like allergies, perhaps seasonal allergies, or maybe just in general. Say you live in a dusty area or something, that would really help to cleanse your air pathways that are located in the nose. So today I would like to discuss the topic of one nostril being more clogged than the other, right? This is from my personal experience, so this is not something I just hear from people. This is something I've lived through. To some extent, I'm still living through it. So the discoveries I've made are basically my own findings. This is my own experience, my own knowledge that I've lived through, and that's how I know it to be true, right? So as it turns out, many people have similar experiences, and that's why once I learned that, it forced me to want to share what I'm about to share. So if you have a problem where one of your nostrils is more clogged, and say when you're breathing, you can say that, okay, on a pretty regular basis, one of my nostrils is getting, say, 60 or 70 or even more % of the intake and outflow, whereas the other one gets the remainder of the 100% that I'm breathing in and breathing out, then there is something you can do about that. And actually, there's something I discovered almost by accident that allowed me to start improving this situation. I had the same situation where the left nostril, I would estimate it to be about 40 or 30% of the overall 100% total, and the right one was doing the majority of the work, so about anywhere from 60 to 70%. And if you haven't heard or discovered that yet, your nose during the day will actually change which nostril is more active and which one is less active, right? This may come as a surprise to you. In fact, this will probably come as a surprise to most Western people, but this is a fact. So perhaps if you have a really, really bad problem, like you have a clogged nose, or one nostril is dominating pretty heavily, you may not notice that. Maybe for you, the nose is pretty fixed in terms of it not switching. However, I was lucky that my nose would still switch a little bit, so I was able to actually see that despite the left nostril being pretty clogged. So that was the first step towards a solution. There came a time when actually during a deep meditation, I was doing a Vipassana retreat, and there came a time where on one of the days, pretty early on, I noticed that my left nostril was actually breathing a lot more than the right one. In other words, the situation reversed. And that was pretty unusual for me. I mean, so unusual that I never remember that happening, right? And obviously, I took a mental note, and pretty much during the entire Vipassana retreat, I was doing a 10-day retreat, I noticed that my nostrils would alternate pretty regularly, right? That's how they are supposed to do. And we can discuss this just in a little bit, why that happens. But if your nose is not doing that, perhaps you cannot see that. Well, in that case, then maybe you might just have to take what I'm explaining kind of on faith and just try some of these things out, right? I'm not asking you to try anything crazy. I'm just going to give you a simple exercise. For those who can already observe this phenomenon of the nostrils being interchanged, right? So there is a time during your day when the right one breathes more. There's a time during the day when the left one participates in the breathing more, dominates the breathing process. And then there is time when they're about equal, right? If you can observe that, then you can actually, you don't even have to take what I'm going to say on faith. You can just try it out and you will probably get some experience along the lines of what I had. So why is this happening, and what is it that people tend not to know? Well, the major thing that needs to be said about the nose is that it's not just physiological, right? Yes, physiologically the nose is important, and once again I'm going to show this kettle just to remind you that I talked about a lot of these intro topics in that video. So the nose is not just physiological in that it provides air pathways for the oxygen to get in the lungs. It's actually part of the more complicated kind of a subtle system. In yoga, it's called the energy body, the so-called prana body, right? So prana being the energy, and hence we get the name pranayama. Depending on how you break down that word in Sanskrit, it's either kind of a control of the prana. If you take prana as the prana and then yama is the control, yama also being the very first step of the yoga, where you actually, it's the moral layer where you control your own behavior in that you don't engage, right? There's things like non-aggression, there is things like non-killing, non-stealing, you know, and so on. So it's something called yama. So there are several other ways people break down this word, and you don't have to subscribe to one or the other. But point being is our breath participates in this energetic body. And that's why in yoga we have a lot of these breathing exercises called pranayamas. So essentially what we do in pranayamas, as opposed to meditation, we control our breath, right? We pretty much have 4 variables, and actually there is 2 more. So 4 variables is the inhale, we have the pause, we can make the pause, the delay after we inhale. Then we have the exhale, and we can make the pause or delay after exhale. So that's 4 variables. And the other 2 variables, or I guess the 1 dimension or the 2 variables, so it's multiplying by 2. Each one gets you the yes or no, 2 options. So it's which nostril we do that through. Right, so technically you can block one and do it all through the left, and then block the other one and do it all through the right. Right, so overall we have kind of these things we can play with, and pretty much all the pranayamas, the entire thing of pranayamas is kind of playing with those variables and basically doing something. Today, one of the exercises that I'm going to give is actually probably the most basic pranayama one can do. But I would not underestimate the effects it's going to give you. There's a pretty big kind of tendency in the yoga world, especially, well, at least from what I see, that manifests itself in people wanting to kind of go out and find some guru or master, which there's nothing wrong with, by the way, but basically try to find one and expect him to give the students some kind of a crazy secret pranayama that is like in a month is going to take them from a person who is clouded by ignorance, right, whose mind and the way he or she sees things is clouded by ignorance, is going to take them to Buddhahood in the matter of a month, right, just by having some pranayama. And I always found it a little crazy in that people expect that. So the approach I always took in anything I do is that you have to have the fundamentals mastered, because if you don't have the fundamentals mastered, then it will never allow you to progress highly in the more complicated, kind of more advanced things. Well, the pranayama we're going to discuss today is the fundamentals of the pranayama work in yoga. And what's more, this pranayama actually can give you very, very important results, which it did for me. And that's why I'm making this video, because the experience I had with it, with the most basic layer, basically allowed me to see how I can unclog one of the nostrils, right? How I can move towards solving this problem of imbalanced breathing when it comes to which nostril it goes through. So let's go back for a second to the actual prana body, right? So in the yoga tradition, we have there are a lot of things we can discuss here, but let's discuss the two types of manifestations of this energy, right? In the Tao, in the Chinese Tao tradition, it's called yin and yang. So in the more Western formulation, it would be called masculine and feminine energy. So in yoga, these energy channels, they're called Ida and Pingala, right? Those are the Sanskrit terms. So as it turns out, the right nostril is actually responsible and kind of subtly connected to the masculine energy channel, and is responsible for stimulating and just kind of connecting with that energy, whereas the left one is responsible for the more feminine one, for the more subtle one. So this may seem to you like some kind of okay, this guy is just talking about some kooky things or some esoteric things, and that's fine. You know, if you don't have certain experiences, that's quite all right. So just wait till I get to talk about the exercise. You can just try it and then, you know, see if it works for you, see for yourself. But if you're okay with what I'm discussing, then I can just tell you that, okay, so the way I knew this thing was really something I wanted to explore in terms of the model of reality, and that how I knew that it actually was something that contained some elements of truth, is that I noticed that whenever I would go outside into the world, say almost immediately after I stepped across my door and went about my day, I would notice, because my consciousness was already kind of single pointed enough, that I would notice things like that on a pretty regular basis. I mean, this was a very kind of a gross, big thing to notice for me, right? I noticed much subtler things on a regular basis. But I noticed that my breath would switch to be dominated by the right side, right? And if you think about it, this makes quite a bit of sense. So the masculine energy kicked in, right? You're out there in the world doing stuff. It's the kind of a material type of action, right? You're taking action. And on the contrary, I would notice that, say, if I sit down into meditation, or just maybe I'm at home doing something where I'm doing more of a introspective work, I am turning my consciousness inward, I would notice that after 15 or 20 minutes, my left nostril would actually begin to dominate the breath. I'm not talking about those things becoming balanced. I'm talking about the left one, taking 60 or 70%, and the right one ending up with 30 or 40% of the volume of air, right? And someone might say, well, that's just in your head. Well, this is what I thought as well. So I started doing experiments in those moments. I would just take 2 fingers, bring them close to my nose, and just observe, based on the sensation on my fingers, which one is actually participating. And I noticed that it's not just in my head, it's actually a physical reality. So long story short, I mean, I also had an experience where I actually learned to block one nostril completely without my hands. So just with the consciousness, you can block which one is participating. Either, if you get quite good at it, you can block fully, or you can visibly shift one way or the other. And this is without any hands or any kind of a physical blockage. So having said that, let's talk about what is it that one can do, right? And the reason we have these blockages, and if you notice, you're most likely, right, anybody watching it is most likely to have the left nostril that's participating less than the right one. That's probably, if I had to estimate, with a 95% probability, or even higher than that, that is what you have. You have the left one that's kind of under doing its job than the right one. I know the statistics because I did a similar video on my Russian channel, so I have also a channel where I'm broadcasting similar topics and similar videos. Oftentimes they kind of double each other and duplicate each other, just in different languages. So I gathered a bit of statistics from people saying, and pretty much 100%, I mean, I haven't had a single person in the comments on that video say, oh, you know, I have the right one that's not doing enough and the left one is fully open. Everybody says that their right one is more open than the left one. How can they fix the left one? Well, let's think about this based on what I just introduced you to, right? So if the left one is responsible for our subtle, kind of a more inward aimed, introspective type of energies, why are they blocked, right? Why are all these people saying my left one is blocked and my right one is open? You know, for a long time, actually, I thought, I mean, I've lived with this since the childhood, and I would try to fix it. And eventually, you know, I said, why is that a problem? So I looked in my nose, kind of poked my fingers in there, and I decided, okay, my left one is not breathing because my nose is crooked and the left one has a smaller hole. Well, after a while, just not too long ago, I realized this makes no sense at all, right? Even if the hole is a little bit smaller, it's not going to affect your breath to the point where it feels like, okay, this nostril is nearly completely clogged, whereas the other one is breathing openly. There is something else going on. There is something more going on. And the explanation that really made sense, that's how I understand it now, is through these energetic bodies. Because when you start doing this exercise that I keep advertising, and I'm going to show it in a second, you will eventually work your left energy channel, right? The feminine energy channel enough that will actually start opening your nostril, right? That's how I learned this. This is how it made sense to me, because when I started doing certain things, other things started happening as a result, as a consequence. And then I got these confirmations on the physical level. So that was pretty much how it happened. But going back to the reason, why is the left one? Why is the feminine clogged? Well, if you think about the world we live in, it's always living outside. People are never encouraged to go inside and actually do something. Yes, we have the meditation spreading a little bit, or at least some form, or kind of a lame form in many ways, but something is starting up. But these efforts and just what people do with it are still so rudimentary. People are in the West, and in many ways, I'm also a product of the Western civilization. They cannot sit for a long time. Their bodies are, might as well be made out of kind of concrete or wood, because they don't bend very well. People have problems with joints, karmic issues, and we can discuss these topics. But long story short, they can't sit very well. So even if they try the meditation, it doesn't really do the meditation proper, right? It's not like fully turning the inward gaze. It's more just very rudimentary first steps. So it's not enough to open this up. So as a whole, as a society, we in the West are strongly kind of masculine dominated. And I don't mean this in some kind of feminist or some kind of a sense like that. No, I mean it strictly from the point of view of these energies. We are very outward oriented. We're about acting in the material world. It's a very materialistic society, right? So we've all but forgotten about this other subtle inner reality and the inner world, right? These subtle realities that exist. And that is why this energy is in very poor condition. So probably if you look at your energy body and the channels that are connected to that energy body, those channels are atrophied. And that is the reason, that is how on the physical level, it actually manifests by clogging your nose. So what you can do then is, from the physical level, you can start affecting that body back. So if you do certain exercises, then you can start affecting and open up those energy channels. So, and this is where we come to this pranayama. This is what one can do to actually improve the situation. The pranayama is called Nadi Shodhana, right? So I'm trying to pronounce it in Sanskrit, or I guess I'm pronouncing it in Sanskrit, but I'm trying to do it in a way that, say, an English speaker would understand. So Nadi Shodhana. right? So it's the basic pranayama. What we do is we sit. First of all, how we sit. Think meditation posture. So something with a straight back, either with your legs crossed. So if you can do lotus, half lotus, then it's great. Sit like that and with your back straight. If you can't do that, sit like a samurai, where you sit on your knees and your butt goes on your heels, right? So in that case, your this part of your leg becomes something you sit on. And you sit again with the back straight. And if you can't do that, there's always the chair as the last resort. So probably the most important thing in this case is to have your back straight. So you sit down. So we're gonna breathe. We need to take the hand, and let me turn around a bit so you can see it better. So here I am sitting with my back straight. And we're gonna take our right hand. There are a couple things we need to remember. So we take it, and we need to get it as close to our chest as possible. So we're not pressing, we're not really kind of suffering and trying to press it in, but we get it pretty tight. The reason for that is I see this all the time. I see even what seems to be like very experienced yoga teachers or instructors or whatever else we can call them, doing pranayamas, and the way they're breathing is like this, right? So friends, we are trying to get this breathing exercise to the point where you're doing it 30 minutes per nostril, right? If you do it with the hand like this, you will never be able to do it. So all weight of your arm here is going to create this torque on your shoulder, right? So it'll just be very painful and your muscle will get fatigued very quickly. So we need to shorten this length so it creates less torque, right? So weight or force times distance at a joint from the application of the force to the joint is torque from physics, right? So we need to shorten that so it's easier for you to hold. That's why we get it close to our chest. So get it close. If you press it in a little bit, you create a little friction here, and then it'll actually be easier because it'll stay. So that's kind of how it looks from the side. You see, I'm not here, I am here, and I'm sitting with my back straight. So then I'm going to take these two fingers. So now let me get back to the straight position. So I'm going to take these two fingers. I'm going to put them between my eyebrows here, right? So there is the energy center here. It's the so-called third eye, or there is a chakra there, right? So you put them here, so that way you stimulate. You can focus your attention here, or you can focus on the actual breath flowing through your nostril. So we go like this, and these two fingers, the thumb and the ring finger, are going to participate in closing your nostril, right? In this case, we're not alternating. I recommend you do one side full time and then switch in the same time on the other side. But basically, say we're closing the left one and we're going to try to breathe through the right one. So in this case, I put my fingers here and I use this ring finger and close my left nostril. You can hear how the sound of my voice changed. So, and then you breathe through the right one. When you breathe, you just breathe normally. You don't control your breath in the sense that you're not trying to make it faster or slower. You just breathe. However, when you breathe, try to establish so that your inhale is about the same length as your exhale, right? It's not critical. You don't have to time it. You don't have to set a timer. But just speaking roughly, just make it so they're about equal. So don't make the inhale really long and then a quick exhale. Don't do that, just about equal. And then start, say, from 5 minutes. 5 minutes, set a timer on your phone or any kind of timer that you have. And just sit down and calmly just breathe at whatever natural pace establishes. You can make it, if you'd like, just a little more energetic. Once again, I suggest you don't control it, but if for some reason you feel the need to, it's all right to just spice it up just a little notch. Not crazy, but you can make it so you actually feel like you're participating, right? So you're not falling asleep. So whenever your time interval passes, switch to the other side. And in this case, say you have a problem with the left one, it's even possible to actually work it even more than the right one. So perhaps you do 10 minutes here, 5 here. That's quite all right. I've tried it both ways. When you do that, what you'll notice is that after a while, you'll start getting experiences where either immediately after this pranayama or sometime after it, or perhaps the next day, say you do this at night and then in the morning, or even in the morning when you wake up, or in the morning when you go out about your day, there will begin appearing moments when your left nostril or whatever problematic side, right? As I said, I haven't seen anybody for whom the right side was the problem. It's always the left side. And I explained to you why in the West that's always the problem. Because it's a very kind of materialistic, outgoing, in the sense that we go out and do things in the material world without ever going inside and introspecting and kind of looking inside our inner subtle world, right? That is, say, typically worked by meditation or just being conscious, being aware, right? So you can meditate by washing dishes or making this video and so on. So you will notice that there'll be appearing shifts. This nostril, the problematic nostril, will begin to open up. First, there'll be moments. Then those moments will turn into something where it subsides more and more, right? For instance, I'm at a point where I cannot say they're perfectly balanced, but on a regular basis, I get it now where this one will dominate the breathing or they're about balanced. So especially I notice that appear after I go and meditate for, say, 30 minutes or an hour, just sit and breathe for a bit. And I will notice that sometime after that, the left nostril will open up and breathe much more fully even than it did before, and also relative to the right one at that same time. So friends, go ahead and try this out. Let me know how it works. Always curious to see, hear how people do with this. So once again, this video is related to this Jala Neti video. Go ahead and watch that. It'll be useful. I suggest you begin with this. This should be done before this pranayama. So pranayama is like an additional new step on top of this cleansing technique. So once again, thanks for watching. Hope you find this useful. Hopefully this brings you good and peace and goes for your benefit and for the benefit of other people and for the good in the world. So thanks for watching. See you in next videos.